March 15, 2024. Maya Chen boards a flight to her Harvard Medical School interview, only to have the lead flight attendant mock her in front of 200 passengers, calling her a scholarship case who stumbled into the wrong cabin. 5 minutes into the flight, an announcement no passenger had ever heard before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an emergency crew change. All current attendants are being removed from duty, effective immediately." What evidence was so damning that the airline risked unprecedented action at 30,000 feet? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen's alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m. in her modest apartment in Baltimore, Maryland. At 23 years old, she had already accomplished what many considered impossible: a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins University. A groundbreaking research paper on gene therapy published in the Journal of Medical Sciences. And now, an interview slot at Harvard Medical School, one of only 12 candidates selected from over 8,000 applicants nationwide. Maya stood before her bathroom mirror, carefully arranging her natural black hair into a professional bun. Her mother's jade bracelet, the only piece of jewelry she owned that held real value, caught the light as she fastened it around her wrist. It belonged to her grandmother, who had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and dreams for future generations. "You wear that today." Maya, her mother had insisted the night before during their video call. "Grandma always said jade brings clarity and protection." "You'll need both," Maya smiled at the memory. Her parents, Dr. James Chen and Linda Chen, had built Chen Pharmaceuticals from a small research lab into a biotech company valued at $4.2 billion. But they had never forgotten their humble beginnings. James had arrived in America at age 7, his parents working double shifts at restaurants to afford a tiny apartment in Queens, New York. Linda's family had faced similar struggles, building their life from scratch in Los Angeles. Despite their wealth now, the Chen family lived relatively modestly. Maya had insisted on earning her own way through college, taking on tutoring jobs and research assistant positions rather than relying solely on her parents' fortune. "Privilege is what you're born with," her father often said. "Character is what you build yourself." The interview at Harvard wasn't just another achievement for Maya. It represented a lifelong dream of following in her father's footsteps while carving her own path. James had become a pharmaceutical CEO, but Maya wanted to practice medicine directly, working with underserved communities that reminded her of her grandparents' early struggles in America. She reviewed her notes one final time. Her research on accessible gene therapy treatments for sickle cell disease had caught the attention of Dr. Patricia Morrison, head of Harvard's Medical Research Division. The interview would determine whether Maya would spend the next 4 years in one of the world's most prestigious medical programs. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Baby girl, remember, you belong in every room you enter. Not because of our last name, but because you've earned it. Love you. Call me when you land." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Her father understood the invisible battles she would face, the questioning glances, the assumptions about her qualifications, the whispered doubts about whether she was admitted for merit or diversity. Quotas. Baltimore-Washington International Airport hummed with pre-dawn activity as Maya arrived at 5:45 a.m. for her 7:30 a.m. flight to Boston. She had deliberately chosen an early flight to arrive with time to spare, refusing to let anything jeopardize this opportunity. The airport's fluorescent lights cast everything in a sterile glow. Business travelers rushed past, dragging carry-on luggage and clutching coffee cups. Families corralled tired children toward their gates. Maya felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach, not about the interview itself, but about the journey there. She had flown dozens of times, but something about today felt different. Perhaps it was the weight of the opportunity ahead. Perhaps it was the memory of her grandmother's stories about facing discrimination with quiet dignity. Or perhaps it was simply the vulnerability of being young and black in spaces where others often questioned whether you belonged. At the check-in counter, Maya presented her boarding pass. The agent, a middle-aged white woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, glanced at the ticket, then at Maya, then back at the ticket. "First class?" And the agent asked, her tone carrying just a hint of surprise. "Yes," Maya replied evenly, accustomed to this particular microaggression. "Big interview in Boston," Maya added, though she immediately regretted feeling the need to justify herself. The agent processed her luggage without further comment, but Maya noticed the woman's eyes linger on her slightly worn backpack and simple black blazer. Maya had learned that judgment often came in glances rather than words, the raised eyebrow, the second look, the pause that spoke volumes. Security proceeded smoothly, and Maya made her way to gate C-17. She found a quiet corner near the window, watching planes taxi across the tarmac as the sun began to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She pulled out her tablet to review her presentation one final time, determined to be over-prepared rather than simply prepared. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from her best friend, Keisha Williams, who had been her roommate at Johns Hopkins. "You're going to crush this interview. Harvard doesn't know what's about to hit them. Call me the second you're done. Love you, sis." Security proceeded smoothly, and Maya made her way to gate C-17. She found a quiet corner near the window, watching planes taxi across the tarmac as the sun began to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She pulled out her tablet to review her presentation one final time, determined to be over-prepared rather than simply prepared. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from her best friend Keisha Williams, who had been her roommate at Johns Hopkins. "You're going to crush this interview. Harvard doesn't know what's about to hit them. Call me the second you're done. Love you, sis." Maya grinned. Keisha had been her rock through undergraduate years, understanding the unique pressures Maya faced as one of the few black women in their advanced biochemistry program. They had studied together through countless late nights, celebrated each other's victories, and supported each other through moments when the world seemed determined to make them prove themselves repeatedly. Final boarding call for United Airlines. Flight 847 to Boston Logan International Airport. All remaining passengers should proceed to gate C-17 immediately. Maya gathered her belongings and joined the line. She noticed a few other passengers in business attire, likely consultants or executives heading to meetings in Boston. A young white couple with a toddler stood behind her, the child clutching a stuffed elephant. An elderly Asian man read a newspaper folded into quarters, his carry-on bag resting against his leg, as Maya handed her boarding pass to the gate agent. A different woman than the one at check-in. She noticed the agent's smile fade slightly when looking at her ticket. "First class is to the left once you board," the agent said, with a tone that seemed to carry an unspoken question mark. "Thank you," Maya replied, maintaining her composure. She had learned from her father that responding to subtle discrimination with grace was both a survival skill and a form of quiet resistance. The jetway felt longer than usual as Maya walked toward the aircraft. She could hear the muffled sounds of the plane's engines and the chatter of passengers already settled in their seats. As she stepped onto the plane, she was immediately struck by the contrast between first class and the economy section visible beyond the curtain. Wider seats, more legroom, and an air of exclusivity that seemed almost palpable. A flight attendant stood in the galley area, arranging items in an overhead compartment. The woman was in her early 40s, with blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a name tag that read Jessica Walsh, senior flight attendant. She glanced at Maya with an expression that wasn't quite welcoming, but wasn't overtly hostile either, just a look of vague assessment. Maya found her seat, 2A, a window position. As she moved to place her backpack in the overhead bin, she noticed Jessica Walsh watching her. The flight attendant's eyes traveled from Maya's worn backpack to her simple outfit, and something shifted in her expression, a hardening around the eyes, a tightening of the lips. "Excuse me," Maya said politely. "Could you help me with this?" Jessica turned away without responding, suddenly very interested in organizing magazines in the seat-back pockets across the aisle. Maya managed to stow her backpack herself and settled into her seat, pulling out her tablet. The leather seat was comfortable, far more spacious than economy, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced up to see Jessica Walsh still observing her, now whispering to another flight attendant, a younger man with dark hair whose name tag read Derek Martinez. Both flight attendants looked in Maya's direction, and Derek's eyebrows rose slightly. He said something back to Jessica, who shook her head and laughed, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. Maya's stomach tightened. She had experienced enough subtle discrimination to recognize the signs, the looks, the whispers, the sudden shift in demeanor. She pulled out her phone and quickly texted her father, "Boarding now. Flight attendant giving me weird vibes, but I'm sure it's nothing. Love you." Her father's response came immediately. "Trust your instincts, baby girl. But remember, you have every right to be there. Call me when you land. And Maya, I'm so proud of you." As other passengers boarded, Maya noticed a pattern. Jessica Walsh greeted white first-class passengers with warm smiles and offers of pre-flight beverages. But when Maya had arrived, there had been no greeting, no offer of water or orange juice, just that assessing look and the subsequent whispered conversation. The elderly Asian man from the gate area took seat 3C across the aisle. Jessica immediately offered him a warm towel and a choice of drinks. "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I get you anything before departure?" Maya watched this interaction, feeling a familiar knot form in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had countless times before, in stores where she was followed by security while white shoppers browsed freely, in academic settings where her ideas were questioned more rigorously than her white peers, in everyday interactions where she had to prove she belonged in spaces others simply inhabited without question. She took a deep breath, remembering her grandmother's words passed down through her father. "Dignity is not given by others. It's something you carry within yourself, regardless of how you're treated." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya opened her tablet and returned to her research notes, determined not to let anyone's prejudice distract her from the opportunity ahead. But even as she read about gene therapy protocols and treatment outcomes, she remained acutely aware of Jessica Walsh's continued glances in her direction, glances that promised this flight might be far more challenging than the interview waiting at the other end. What Maya didn't know was that her instincts were more accurate than she could have imagined. And what Jessica Walsh didn't know was that her judgment and actions were about to set in motion a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever, including her own. The aircraft door sealed, shut with a heavy thunk, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure." Maya fastened her seatbelt, unaware that the next 2 hours would test everything her parents had taught her about dignity, resilience, and standing up for herself in the face of injustice. The plane pushed back from the gate at exactly 7:32 a.m., 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Maya felt the familiar lurch as the aircraft began its journey toward the runway. She had just opened her research notes on her tablet when Jessica Walsh's voice cut through the cabin. "Ma'am, you'll need to put that away now." Maya looked up to find Jessica standing directly over her seat, hands on her hips. The tone wasn't the polite request flight attendants typically used. It carried an edge of authority mixed with something else. Impatience, contempt. "Of course," Maya replied, reaching to close her tablet cover. "I was just—" "Now please," Jessica interrupted sharply, her voice loud enough that several passengers turned to look. "We're preparing for takeoff." Maya quickly stowed her tablet in the seat pocket, her cheeks warming with embarrassment. Across the aisle, she noticed the elderly Asian man was still reading his newspaper, and Jessica had walked right past him without a word, Derek Martinez. The younger flight attendant moved through the cabin checking overhead bins. He paused near Maya's row, glancing between her and Jessica with an uncomfortable expression, but said nothing. As the plane taxied, Jessica returned to the galley area visible from Maya's seat. She was speaking to another flight attendant Maya hadn't seen yet, a woman in her 30s with red hair pulled into a ponytail. Her name tag read Sharon Bennett. Jessica gestured in Maya's direction while talking, and Sharon's eyes widened before both women looked directly at Maya. Maya's heart began to beat faster. This wasn't paranoia. This was targeted. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please be seated for takeoff." Jessica and Sharon took their jump seats facing the first-class cabin, which meant they were looking directly at Maya and the other passengers in the front rows. Throughout the entire takeoff sequence, Maya could feel Jessica's eyes on her, studying her with undisguised scrutiny. The plane lifted off smoothly, climbing through the morning clouds. Maya tried to focus on the view outside her window, the city of Baltimore shrinking below, the Chesapeake Bay glittering in the early sunlight, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Once the seatbelt sign dinged off, Jessica immediately stood and began the beverage service. Maya watched as she worked her way through the cabin with practiced efficiency, offering warm smiles and chatty conversation to other passengers. "Good morning. Can I offer you something to drink? We have fresh orange juice, coffee, tea, or perhaps a mimosa to start your day." The white businessman in seat 1A accepted coffee with a smile. The couple in seats 1C and 1D asked for mimosas and received them with a wonderful choice. "Enjoy." Jessica moved to row 2. She served the elderly Asian man his requested tea with the same pleasant demeanor. Then she turned to Maya. The smile vanished completely. "What do you want?" Jessica asked, her tone flat and barely professional. Maya blinked at the sudden shift. "Could I have water, please? And maybe some orange juice?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Water is complimentary. Orange juice is for first-class passengers." Maya felt her stomach drop. I'm in first class. This is seat 2A. "I can see where you're sitting," Jessica replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do you have your boarding pass?" "Yes, of course." Maya reached into her blazer pocket and produced the boarding pass, hands trembling slightly. She hated that she was shaking, hated giving this woman the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Jessica snatched the boarding pass and examined it with exaggerated thoroughness, holding it up to the light, as though checking for counterfeiting. The elderly man across the aisle cleared his throat uncomfortably. Other passengers were now openly watching the interaction. "How exactly did you pay for this ticket?" Jessica asked, her voice carrying clearly through the quiet cabin. Maya's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a simple question. How did you pay for this first-class ticket?" Jessica's tone had grown louder, more aggressive. "Because in my 15 years of doing this job, I can usually tell when something doesn't add up." The implication hung in the air like poison. Maya felt heat flooding her face, not from shame, but from the humiliation of being interrogated in front of strangers, based solely on the color of her skin. "I don't think that's any of your business," Maya said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady like her father had taught her. "My ticket is valid, as you can see. May I please have water and orange juice?" Jessica's face hardened. "Your ticket might say first class, but your attitude certainly doesn't. First-class passengers know how to behave appropriately." "Excuse me," the elderly man interjected softly. "The young lady has done nothing inappropriate. She simply asked for a beverage." Jessica whirled on him. "Sir, I appreciate your input, but this doesn't concern you. I'm handling a situation with this passenger." "What situation?" Maya asked, her voice finally rising despite her efforts to remain calm. "I boarded with a valid ticket. I've been nothing but polite." "What exactly is the situation you're handling?" "The situation," Jessica said, stepping closer to Maya's seat in a move that felt deliberately intimidating, "is that you're being disrespectful and disruptive. And I'm going to have to ask you to keep your voice down." "I'm not raising my voice," Maya protested, though she realized she was now, because how could she not? when being accused of something she wasn't doing. "You are now," Jessica said with a satisfied smirk. She turned to Derek, who had been standing frozen near the galley. "Derek, please note that the passenger in 2A has become verbally aggressive with crew members." "What?" Maya felt the word catch in her throat. "I haven't been aggressive. I asked for a drink and now you're arguing with me," Jessica interrupted. "Which is only making this worse for yourself." In seat 4B, a woman in her 20s with brown hair, pulled into a messy bun, had begun recording on her phone, holding it low against her lap. Her name was Rachel Martinez, no relation to Derek, and she was a graduate student in social justice at Boston University. She had been filming since Jessica first approached Maya's seat. In seat 3D, a middle-aged black businessman named Robert Foster had also begun recording. He had experienced this exact scenario himself 3 years earlier on a different airline, and had sworn then that if he ever witnessed it happening to someone else, he would document every second. What none of them knew, what would only be discovered later, was that the aircraft's internal security cameras were capturing everything from multiple angles, including the audio that the seatback cameras picked up with crystal clarity. Jessica returned to the galley, speaking in heated whispers with Sharon Bennett. Derek stood awkwardly between them, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm telling you, there's something off about her," Jessica hissed, just loud enough for Maya to overhear. "She's probably using miles or points or got upgraded somehow. She doesn't belong up here. Maybe we should just serve her and move on," Derek suggested weakly. "No," Jessica said firmly. "I'm a senior flight attendant on this aircraft, and I decide who gets service and who gets managed. This is exactly the kind of passenger who causes problems and then plays the victim. I've seen it before." Sharon glanced nervously toward Maya. "But she hasn't actually done anything wrong." "Yet," Jessica said ominously. "But she will. They always do. Trust me, I'm protecting this flight." Jessica emerged from the galley holding a small bottle of water. Not the full-size bottles served to other first-class passengers, but the smaller economy bottles. She walked to Maya's seat and placed it on her tray table with unnecessary force. "Your water," she announced. "The orange juice, unfortunately, we're out of." Maya looked at the other passengers nearby, all of whom had been served orange juice from a clearly full pitcher still visible in the galley. The lie was so blatant, so deliberately cruel, that for a moment Maya couldn't even respond. "I can see the orange juice right there," she finally said, pointing toward the galley. "That's reserved for other passengers," Jessica replied coolly. "Other passengers." Maya repeated, her voice breaking slightly. "You mean white passengers?" The cabin went completely silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade into the background of that charged moment. Jessica's face flushed red. "How dare you accuse me of racism? I have served passengers of all backgrounds for 15 years, without incident. Then why am I being treated differently than everyone else in this cabin?" Maya demanded, feeling tears prick her eyes, but refusing to let them fall. "Why was I questioned about my ticket? Why are you refusing to serve me the same beverages everyone else received? Why am I being singled out?" "Because your behavior has been unacceptable since boarding," Jessica shot back. "And now you're playing the race card to avoid accountability." "This is exactly what I was talking about." The elderly man across the aisle stood up from his seat. "Young lady," he said to Maya, "I have been watching this entire interaction, and you have done absolutely nothing wrong. This is discrimination, plain and simple. Sir, sit down or I will have to report you as well," Jessica snapped. "Report me for what? Speaking the truth?" The man's voice was gentle but firm. "I am retired federal judge Henry Liu, and what I'm witnessing here is clearly discriminatory treatment based on race." Jessica's confidence faltered for just a moment before her expression hardened again. "Judge or not, you don't run this aircraft." "I do," she turned back to Maya. "Final warning, stop disrupting this flight, or I will have no choice but to contact the captain about a security concern." "A security concern?" Maya felt her voice rising again, panic creeping in now. "For asking for orange juice?" Jessica marched to the front of the cabin and picked up the intercom phone. She spoke quietly into it, but her eyes remained fixed on Maya with undisguised hostility. Maya fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She pulled up her father's contact and hit the FaceTime button. It rang once, twice, then his face appeared on the screen, first confused, then immediately concerned when he saw her expression. "Maya? Baby girl, what's wrong? You look upset." "Dad," Maya whispered, tears finally spilling over. "The flight attendant is harassing me. She's saying I'm a security concern. Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. I just asked for orange juice and she—" Slow down, James said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Tell me exactly what's happening. Are you safe?" As Maya began to explain, Jessica noticed the phone call. Her eyes widened, and she quickly ended her conversation with the cockpit. She strode back to Maya's seat. "You need to end that call immediately. Phone calls are not permitted during flight. We're at cruising altitude," Judge Liu interjected. "Phone calls are absolutely permitted. I believe what you mean is that you don't want this young woman documenting your harassment of her. Dad, can you hear this?" Maya angled the phone so James could see Jessica. Jessica's face went white when she saw the phone screen. "Turn that off right now!" "Who is that?" James asked calmly from the phone, though his jaw was visibly clenched. "Who's telling my daughter to turn off a legal phone call?" "Your daughter?" Jessica repeated, and something shifted in her expression, a flicker of uncertainty, quickly replaced by doubling down. "I don't care whose daughter she is. She's being disruptive and refusing to follow crew instructions." "What instructions has she refused to follow?" James asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to end this call," Jessica said to the phone, as though James himself were on the plane. "This call is not ending," James said firmly. "And I suggest you get your supervisor on this line immediately." "Because I am Dr. James Chen, CEO of Chen Pharmaceuticals, and I can assure you that your airline will be hearing from me." Jessica's face went pale. She grabbed the phone from Maya's hand before Maya could react. "Hey!" Maya shouted. "Give that back." "Confiscating electronic devices used in a threatening manner," Jessica announced loudly, holding the phone up. On the screen, James's voice could be heard demanding the phone be returned to his daughter immediately. Jessica disconnected the call and handed the phone to Derek. "Lock this in the galley safe. The passenger will receive it back upon landing." Maya stood up from her seat, her whole body shaking. "You can't do that. That's my property. You had no right." "Sit down," Jessica commanded. "Now." "Not until you return my phone," Maya said, her voice stronger now despite the tears streaming down her face. Jessica's hand moved to the intercom again. When she spoke, her voice carried through the entire cabin. "Captain, this is Walsh. We have a situation in first class. Passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions and has become physically aggressive. Requesting we return to Baltimore immediately for passenger removal." Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. The plane was turning around. They were taking her back. She was going to miss her interview. And everyone on this aircraft now thought she was some kind of threat, all because she had asked for orange juice while being black. Judge Liu stood again. "This is absolutely outrageous. I'm witnessing a gross abuse of authority and blatant racial discrimination." Rachel Martinez held her phone higher, no longer trying to conceal that she was recording. "I got everything," she called out to Maya, "every single word, but the damage was done." The plane was already banking left, beginning its turn back toward Baltimore. Maya sank into her seat, buried her face in her hands, and began to sob, not just from humiliation or anger, but from the crushing weight of having her dreams derailed by someone's prejudice. What none of them knew, not Jessica, not Maya, not even the passengers, documenting everything, was that Maya's disconnected. Phone call had remained connected for 7 seconds, longer than anyone realized, 7 seconds during which Dr. James Chen had heard everything, and he had already made 3 phone calls of his own while Flight 847 made its descent back to Baltimore. Rachel Martinez had already uploaded her video footage to Twitter with the caption, watching a black woman get harassed and removed from first class for literally asking for orange juice. This is 2024 and this is still happening. Dark's flight while black. Now United Airlines. The video went viral within minutes. By the time the plane touched down at BWI, the hashtag Justice for Maya was already trending in Baltimore. But the algorithm worked in mysterious ways. And the video that gained the most traction wasn't Rachel's complete footage. It was a shortened clip uploaded by someone in economy class who had only captured the moment Maya stood up and raised her voice. With no context of what came before, that edited version, posted by user EarthTravelTruth 2024, showed Maya appearing confrontational, Jessica looking professional and calm, and the caption read, "Entitled passenger causes flight to turn around because she didn't get special treatment. This is why flights are always delayed. Entitled passengers, respect the crew." Within an hour, this version had twice as many views as Rachel's full video. Comments flooded in. Another person thinking rules don't apply to them. Flight attendants deal with enough without passengers. Playing victim. Why is it always someone screaming discrimination when they simply can't follow instructions? Maya sat in an airport security office, numb to everything around her. Her phone had been returned when they landed, but she couldn't bring herself to look at it. Security officers had questioned her for 20 minutes before determining that she had, in fact, done nothing wrong. But by then, the damage was complete. Her Harvard interview had been scheduled to start in 2 hours. There was no way she could make it now. Maya finally unlocked her phone to find 847 notifications, text messages, missed calls, social media tags, email alerts. Her hands trembled as she opened her messages. Her father had called 12 times. Keisha had texted, "Z, what's happening? Someone just sent me a video. Is that you on that flight? Call me now." Her mother, "Baby, your father told me what happened. We're coming to get you. Stay where you are," but there were other messages too. Unknown numbers. "You should be ashamed of yourself, making everything about race. Typical behavior. This is why people can't stand." The message contained a racial slur. "Maybe if you acted like you belonged in first class, instead of causing drama." Maya's stomach churned. She opened Twitter against her better judgment. Her name was everywhere. Someone had found her LinkedIn profile and posted screenshots. Others had discovered her Instagram account, private, but the profile picture was visible and were flooding it with hateful messages. Harvard Medical School interview candidate causes flight. Emergency was the headline on a clickbait news site that had already picked up the edited video. Maya clicked the article. It painted her as an entitled student who had verbally abused flight crew and refused to follow safety instructions, forcing an emergency return that had cost the airline thousands of dollars and delayed 200 passengers. The article mentioned her father's name, Dr. James Chen, CEO of Chen Pharmaceuticals, with the implication that she was used to getting special treatment and couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. "Oh God," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face again. This was destroying not just her reputation, but potentially her father's as well. Chen Pharmaceuticals' stock price was probably already being affected by association with the entitled CEO's daughter. She dialed her father with shaking hands. "Maya," James answered immediately. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "Dad, I'm so sorry," Maya sobbed. "I'm so sorry. This is everywhere. They're making me look like some kind of monster." "Your company?" "Stop," James said firmly. "Listen to me very carefully, baby girl. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Do you understand me?" "But the articles, the videos, are lies," James interrupted. "And we're going to prove it. Your mother and I are 10 minutes from the airport." "Stay exactly where you are." James Chen sat in the back of his company car, his jaw clenched so tightly his teeth ached. Beside him, his wife Linda gripped his hand, her own face set with determination. The 7-second audio recording from Maya's phone call sat on his laptop, already backed up to 3 different cloud services and his company's secure servers. In those 7 seconds, Jessica Walsh's voice was crystal clear, confiscating electronic devices used in a threatening manner. But more importantly, James had stayed on the line for the entire incident. His AirPods had remained connected. He had recorded everything that happened after Jessica took Maya's phone, the escalating accusations, the announcement to the captain, Judge Liu's protests, Rachel calling out that she had recorded everything. During those 23 minutes while the plane returned to Baltimore, James had made 3 critical phone calls. The first was to Marcus Washington, Chen Pharmaceuticals' chief legal counsel and James's closest friend since college. "I need everything," James had said. "Every legal option, every precedent, every piece of ammunition we have." The second call was to Patricia Holmes, a former investigative journalist who now ran a PR crisis management firm. "Someone is trying to destroy my daughter's reputation with edited videos. I need the truth to come out faster than the lies spread." The third call had been the most important. James had contacted United Airlines corporate headquarters directly, asking for the CEO. When he couldn't reach her immediately, he'd left a message with her executive assistant. "This is Dr. James Chen of Chen Pharmaceuticals. Your airline just discriminated against my daughter, and I have audio evidence of the entire incident. Your CEO has 1 hour to return my call before I go public with everything I have. And you might want to check your company's medical supply contracts, specifically which pharmaceutical company provides your emergency medical kits." That last part had been strategic. Chen Pharmaceuticals had a $40 million annual contract with United Airlines, providing all emergency medical supplies for their entire fleet. It was leverage, yes, but more than that. It was a reminder that actions had consequences. By the time James and Linda arrived at the airport security office, Marcus Washington was already there, along with Patricia Holmes and her associate David Kim, a digital forensics expert. Maya looked up when they entered, her face blotchy from crying. "Dad!" James crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled his daughter into his arms. "I've got you! We've got you. This ends now." Linda wrapped her arms around them both, and for a moment they just stood there, a family united against injustice. "Okay," James finally said, pulling back and gently wiping tears from Maya's cheeks. "Let's fix this. Patricia Holmes, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair, opened her tablet. "I've already identified 12 different videos of the incident from various passengers. 3 show the complete interaction, 9 show only partial footage. The most viral video is from an account called Travel Truth 2024, posted by someone named Craig Henderson, who was seated in row 23, economy class. He couldn't have seen or heard most of what actually happened. Can we prove the video is misleadingly edited?" Linda asked. "Already working on it," David Kim replied, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. "I'm creating a timeline showing exactly what was cut out and how the narrative was manipulated. But we need the full security footage from the aircraft to really nail this." "Already requested it," Marcus said, looking up from his phone. "United's legal team is stalling, but they'll turn it over, especially after they heard James's recording." "They heard it?" Maya asked. James nodded. "I sent it to their corporate office 20 minutes ago, along with a letter from Marcus detailing every legal violation their employee committed. Civil rights violations, false imprisonment, theft of personal property, defamation, and emotional distress, just for starters." "What about my interview?" Maya asked quietly. "Harvard." "I called Dr. Morrison personally," Linda said gently. She was a biologist herself and had professional connections throughout the medical research community. "I explained what happened. She's horrified and wants to reschedule. She also offered to write a formal statement supporting you if needed." Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his eyebrows shot up. "Well, that was fast." "What?" James asked. "United just sent over their internal incident report. The one Jessica Walsh filed." Marcus began reading aloud. "Passenger Maya Chen became verbally abusive toward crew members. refused to follow safety instructions, made unfounded accusations of discrimination, physically stood in a threatening manner, and created a security concern requiring aircraft to return to Origin Airport. "That's all lies," Maya exclaimed. "We know," Marcus said calmly. "But here's what's interesting. She filed this report at 8:47 a.m., which according to the flight data was approximately 8 minutes before the plane even took off." Silence filled the room as everyone processed this. She filed a complaint about Maya being disruptive. "Before anything had actually happened," Patricia said slowly. "Exactly," Marcus replied, his eyes gleaming. "Which means this wasn't reactive. It was premeditated." James felt cold rage settling over him. "She planned to target Maya from the moment she saw her board that plane." "It gets worse," Marcus continued, scrolling through his phone. "I pulled Jessica Walsh's employment records, public information from a lawsuit settlement 3 years ago. She's been named in 4 previous discrimination complaints. 3 were settled quietly by the airline with NDAs. 1 is still pending. 4 complaints?" Linda's voice was sharp. "And she's still employed?" "Still employed and recently promoted to senior flight attendant," Marcus confirmed, "which gave her more authority and less oversight." David Kim looked up from his laptop. "I found something else. A Travel Truth 2024, Craig Henderson. He's not just a random passenger. His wife, Susan Henderson, works in United Airlines Corporate Communications Department. She's the one who's been pushing the edited video to news outlets and adding the entitled passenger narrative." The room went silent again. "This isn't just discrimination," Patricia said quietly. "This is a coordinated effort to control the narrative before the truth could come out." James pulled out his phone and checked Chen Pharmaceuticals' stock price. As he'd feared, it had dropped 3% since the viral video started spreading. The company his parents had dreamed of, that he'd built from nothing, was being damaged because an airline employee had decided his daughter didn't belong in first class. "Dad," Maya's voice was small, "I'm sorry about the stock price." James looked at his daughter, brilliant, accomplished, compassionate Maya, who was apologizing for being discriminated against. Something hardened in his chest. "Don't apologize," he said quietly. "Not ever. Not for this." He turned to his team. "We're not settling. We're not staying quiet. We're burning this whole thing down and rebuilding it better." Marcus smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Patricia cracked her knuckles. "Let me make some calls. It's time for the real story to go viral." As the team dispersed to make preparations, James received an email notification. It was from United Airlines CEO Jennifer Morrison, no relation to Harvard's Dr. Morrison. The subject line read, "Urgent, request for discussion regarding Flight 847 incident." James opened it and read the carefully worded message expressing concern, promising a thorough investigation, and suggesting a private meeting to discuss the matter discreetly. He showed it to Marcus, who snorted. Translation: "Please don't sue us and please don't go public. What are you going to do?" Linda asked. James looked at Maya, who was watching him with red-rimmed eyes, but growing determination in her expression. She was her father's daughter, and her grandmother's great-granddaughter. The Chen family didn't back down from fights that mattered. "I'm going to reply," James said, already typing, "and tell her that discretion is no longer an option. The truth is about to come out, all of it, and she has exactly 24 hours to decide whether her airline will be part of the solution or part of the problem." He hit send and turned back to his family and team. "Now," he said, "let's show them what happens when you target the wrong family." 24 hours after the incident, Patricia Holmes stood before a whiteboard in Chen Pharmaceuticals' secure conference room. Photographs, documents, and connecting lines covered the surface like a detective's murder board. "This goes deeper than one discriminatory flight attendant," Patricia announced to the assembled team. James and Linda sat at the conference table. Marcus reviewed documents on his laptop, and David Kim had 3 monitors displaying different data streams. Maya sat quietly in the corner taking notes. She had insisted on being part of every meeting, Patricia tapped a photograph of Jessica Walsh. Jessica Walsh, 44 years old, senior flight attendant with United for 15 years. 4 previous discrimination complaints as we discussed. But look at the pattern. She pointed to dates on the whiteboard. All 4 complaints were filed by passengers of color. 2 black passengers, 1 Hispanic, 1 South Asian, and all were settled with NDAs, Marcus added, looking up from his laptop. But I managed to get sealed court documents from the one case that went to litigation before settling. The passenger, Marcus Tillman, was a junior executive at a Fortune 500 company. He alleged that Walsh not only denied him service, but filed a false security report, claiming he was intoxicated and belligerent. Just like she did with Maya, Linda said quietly. Her hand finding her daughter's, exactly like Maya, Patricia confirmed. But here's where it gets interesting. In each case, the incident report was filed before the actual confrontation occurred. Walsh has a pattern of prejudging passengers based on appearance, then creating situations to justify her prejudice. David Kim swiveled his chair around. I found something else. Walsh's social media accounts. He pulled up screenshots on the main monitor. She's careful, nothing overtly racist on her public profiles, but she's a member of several private Facebook groups. I got access through a source who was already a member. The screenshots showed posts from groups with innocuous names like Aviation Professionals Network and Crew Life Support Group, but the content was anything but professional. One post from Walsh, dated 6 months earlier, had another diverse passenger try to claim discrimination today because I asked them to follow the same rules as everyone else. So tired of the victim mentality. Another, from 3 months ago. Does anyone else notice that certain types of passengers always seem to book first class with miles or upgrades, but never actually pay for tickets? Really makes you wonder. The room fell silent as they read through the posts. Walsh had been documenting her discrimination for months, framing it as frustration with difficult passengers, but the racial coding was unmistakable to anyone paying attention. She's been getting away with this for years, Maya said, her voice tight with anger. How many people like me just accepted it and moved on because fighting seemed harder than surviving it? James squeezed his daughter's shoulder. That ends now. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He put it on speaker. This is Marcus Washington. Mr. Washington, my name is Derek Martinez. I was the flight attendant on Flight 847 with Maya Chen. The young man's voice was shaking. I need to talk to someone about what really happened. Everyone in the room froze. Derek, Marcus said carefully, before you say anything else, you should know you're on speakerphone with the Chen family and their legal team. Do you want to continue? A pause. Then yes, I do. What Jessica did was wrong and I was too scared to stop it. But I can't stay silent anymore. For the next 20 minutes, Derek Martinez described a culture of discrimination that had existed in his crew for the 2 years he'd been flying with Jessica Walsh. He detailed how she would pre-select passengers she deemed problematic, almost always people of color, and create situations to justify removing them or denying them service. She calls it maintaining standards. Derek explained, his voice bitter. She'd say things like, first class is for people who know how to act like they belong there, or we need to protect our valued passengers from disruptive elements. But everyone knew what she really meant. Why didn't you report her? Linda asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious. I did, Derek said quietly. 6 months ago, I filed a formal complaint with my supervisor. I was told that Walsh was a senior employee with an excellent record, and that I needed to be a team player if I wanted to advance in my career. A week later, I was reassigned to the worst routes, constant red-eyes and layovers in cities with no decent crew accommodations. The message was clear. Who was your supervisor? Marcus asked, already typing. Robert Carlson, Regional Crew Operations Manager for the Northeast Division. Marcus pulled up Carlson's employment file. Interesting. Carlson has been with United for 23 years. He's also married to... Marcus stopped, his eyes widening. He's married to Susan Henderson. Wait, Patricia said, leaning forward. Susan Henderson, as in Craig Henderson's wife. The woman who works in corporate communications and pushed the edited video? The same, Marcus confirmed. The connections were falling into place like dominoes. Derek's complaint had been buried by a supervisor whose wife would later help manipulate the narrative against Maya. This wasn't just one flight. Attendant's prejudice. It was a system designed to protect discriminatory employees and silence those who spoke up, Derek, James said, his voice gentle despite the rage simmering beneath. Would you be willing to testify to all of this? Officially? Yes, Derek replied without hesitation. I already wrote everything down. Times, dates, specific incidents. I kept copies of my original complaint and my supervisor's response. And I have something else, group texts between the crew where Jessica would talk about passengers she was targeting. Send everything to Marcus, James instructed. And Derek, thank you. What you're doing takes real courage. After Derek hung up, another call came in. Then another. By the end of the hour, 4 more United Airlines employees had reached out. 2 flight attendants, a gate agent, and a baggage handler, all with stories of Walsh's discriminatory behavior and the system that protected her. David Kim had been working steadily throughout the phone calls, and now he turned his monitors toward the group. I have the complete aircraft security footage. United's legal team finally released it after Marcus filed for an emergency court order. He pressed play, and the conference room fell silent as they watched the incident unfold from multiple camera angles. The footage was damning. It showed Maya boarding politely, Jessica's immediate hostile reaction, the deliberate ignoring of Maya's request for water, the discriminatory beverage service, and the escalating confrontation. But most importantly, it captured audio that the edited viral videos had completely excluded. Listen to this part, David said, going up a specific timestamp. On screen, before Maya had even asked for orange juice, Jessica could be heard whispering to Sharon Bennett, "Watch this one. She's going to be a problem." "They always are. Who's they?" Sharon had asked. Jessica's response, barely audible but clear on the enhanced audio, "You know, the ones who think a fancy degree means they belong everywhere." The racist subtext was undeniable. David pulled up another clip, this one showing Jessica on the phone with the cockpit. The official report claimed she had told the captain that Maya was physically aggressive and refusing to comply. But the actual audio revealed something different. "Captain, I have a situation with a first-class passenger. Black female, early 20s, very entitled attitude. She's been argumentative since boarding, and I don't feel comfortable continuing this flight with her on board. I'm concerned about potential escalation. Not a single word about physical aggression. Not a single word about refusing to comply with safety instructions. Just racial profiling dressed up in professional language. This is gold," Patricia said, already making notes. "With this footage, the edited viral videos, and Derek's testimony, we can prove not just discrimination, but a deliberate attempt to cover it up." Marcus pulled up another document. "And I found the smoking gun in United's internal communications. After Derek filed his complaint about Walsh 6 months ago, there was an email chain between Robert Carlson, Susan Henderson, and United's head of risk management. Thomas Burke," he read aloud. "Burke writes, 'The Walsh situation is becoming a pattern. We've settled 3 complaints already. At what point does she become a liability?' That Carlson responds, 'Walsh is excellent at her job, and passengers who file complaints often have credibility issues. I recommend we continue our current approach.' And Susan Henderson adds, 'Our PR team can manage any negative press. Walsh's longevity and clean public record outweigh occasional complaints from difficult passengers.'" "Difficult passengers," Maya repeated bitterly. "Is that what they call people who don't accept being discriminated against?" Jennifer Morrison, CEO of United Airlines, finally agreed to meet with James Chen at a neutral location, a private conference room in a downtown Baltimore law firm. She arrived with 3 lawyers and her head of risk management. Thomas Burke, James, came with Marcus, Patricia, and one other person who made Morrison visibly uncomfortable the moment she saw her, Judge Henry Liu, who had witnessed the entire incident and was now prepared to testify. "Dr. Chen," Morrison began, her voice professionally cordial but strained, "I want to start by saying how deeply sorry United Airlines is for what your daughter experienced." "Stop," James interrupted quietly. "We're past apologies. Let me show you what we have." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus presented the complete evidence, the unedited security footage, Derek's testimony and text messages, the pattern of settled discrimination complaints, the pre-written incident report, the internal emails showing corporate knowledge of Walsh's behavior, and the evidence of Susan Henderson's involvement in manipulating the viral narrative. Morrison's professional composure cracked as the presentation continued. Her lawyers exchanged increasingly worried glances. Thomas Burke, the risk management head who had recommended keeping Walsh employed despite the pattern of complaints, had gone pale. "This is," Morrison began, then stopped. "Dr. Chen, we had no idea the situation was this extensive." "You had every idea," James countered, his voice sharp. "Your risk management department documented concerns about Walsh 6 months ago. Your corporate communications department actively worked to control the narrative against my daughter. Your regional supervisor buried complaints and retaliated against employees who spoke up. This isn't ignorance, Ms. Morrison. This is institutional complicity." Morrison took a deep breath. "What do you want?" "I want accountability," James said. "Real accountability, not settlements with NDAs that allow this to keep happening to the next person. I want every employee involved in this system of discrimination terminated. I want policy changes that prevent this from happening again. And I want a public acknowledgement of what happened to Maya and every other passenger Walsh targeted." "That's," one of Morrison's lawyers began. "Non-negotiable," James finished. "Because here's what happens if you don't agree. Tomorrow morning, every piece of evidence we've shown you goes public. Patricia has relationships with major media outlets who are ready to run this story. The viral video that's been damaging my daughter's reputation will be exposed as manipulated footage, pushed by your own corporate communications department. And I will personally testify before Congress about how United Airlines maintains a culture that protects discriminatory employees while silencing victims and whistleblowers." He paused, letting that sink in. "Oh, and about that $40 million medical supply contract? Consider it terminated effective immediately. Chen Pharmaceuticals will not do business with companies that discriminate against my daughter or anyone else." Morrison's face tightened. $40 million was significant, but the PR nightmare James was describing would cost exponentially more in revenue, reputation, and stock value. "We need time to discuss internally," Morrison said. "You have 12 hours, Marcus replied, sliding a document across the table. "This is a settlement proposal outlining our terms. Sign it, or we go public with everything tomorrow at 9 a.m. Back at Chen Pharmaceuticals, Maya sat with her parents in James's office as the sun set over Baltimore. The city lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "Do you think they'll sign?" Maya asked. "Yes," James said with certainty. "They can't afford not to. The evidence is too strong, and the potential damage is too severe." Linda turned to her daughter. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" "Really?" Maya considered the question. 24 hours ago, she had been crying in an airport security office, her reputation in tatters and her dreams seemingly destroyed. Now she was at the center of a case that could change airline industry policies nationwide. "I'm angry," Maya said honestly. "Angry that this happened. Angry that it's happened to so many others. Angry that it took my father's resources and connections to even get people to listen." She paused. "But I'm also grateful. Grateful for you both. Grateful for people like Derek Martinez, who found the courage to speak up. Grateful for Judge Liu and Rachel and Robert Foster, who documented everything." She looked at her father. "You asked what I want from all this. I want what you said in that meeting: accountability and change. But I also want something else. What's that? James asked. I want to use this platform to help others who don't have the resources we do. There are probably hundreds of people who've experienced what I did but couldn't fight back. I want to make sure they have a voice too. James smiled, pride evident in his eyes. That's my daughter. Marcus entered the office, phone in hand. United's lawyers just called. Morrison is ready to sign the settlement agreement. All terms accepted. Including the public acknowledgement? Patricia asked, following Marcus into the office. Including everything, Marcus confirmed. Jessica Walsh, Sharon Bennett, and 2 other crew members are terminated effective immediately. Robert Carlson is being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Susan Henderson is fired. And Thomas Burke is being reassigned with a significant demotion. What about the policy changes? Linda asked. They're implementing a new discrimination complaint system with independent oversight, Marcus read from his phone. Mandatory bias training for all employees. A review of all past discrimination complaints with compensation for affected passengers. And a public apology to Maya with the complete security footage released to correct the false narrative. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they weren't from humiliation or fear. They were tears of vindication and relief. There's more, Patricia added. Judge Liu has agreed to chair an independent advisory board that will oversee United's implementation of these changes. And Derek Martinez is being promoted and transferred to a crew that actually values integrity. As the team celebrated the victory, James pulled Maya aside. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Not because we won, but because you never stopped being yourself throughout this nightmare. You stayed dignified when they tried to shame you. You stayed strong when they tried to break you. You're everything your grandmother hoped you would be. Maya hugged her father tightly. I learned from the best. Outside James's office window, the Baltimore skyline sparkled with possibility. Tomorrow, the truth would go as viral as the lies had. Tomorrow, the world would see what really happened on Flight 847. But tonight, the Chen family stood together, knowing that they had fought not just for Maya, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. At 9 a.m. sharp, exactly 48 hours after Flight 847 returned to Baltimore, Patricia Holmes pressed publish on a comprehensive press release that would change everything. Simultaneously, the full, unedited aircraft security footage appeared on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. David Kim had created a split-screen comparison video. On one side, Craig Henderson's viral edited clip that had destroyed Maya's reputation. On the other side, the complete footage showing the actual context. The contrast was devastating. Within minutes, media outlets began retracting their earlier stories. The clickbait headlines about entitled CEO's daughter were replaced with new ones. United Airlines employee caught in racial profiling scheme. Viral video exposed as manipulated. Corporate cover-up revealed. How one flight attendant's racism nearly destroyed an innocent woman's life, Rachel Martinez, whose original complete video had been drowned out by the edited version. Posted an update, vindication. This is why I kept saying context matters. Maya Chen is owed massive apologies from everyone who attacked her. Watch the full footage and see the truth. Her post was shared 200,000 times in the first hour. Judge Henry Liu appeared on CNN by 10:30 a.m., his distinguished presence lending additional credibility to Maya's account. I have spent 40 years in the American justice system, he said, his voice measured and authoritative. What I witnessed on Flight 847 was textbook racial discrimination. Ms. Chen conducted herself with remarkable dignity, while being systematically harassed by a flight attendant who had prejudged her based solely on the color of her skin. By 11:00 a.m., Justice for Maya had been replaced by Stu Maya Chen Truth as the top trending hashtag worldwide. The tide of public opinion had turned completely. Maya sat in her parents' living room, watching her phone with a mixture of relief and residual pain as apologies flooded in from people who had attacked Heard just days before. I'm so sorry for judging without knowing the full story. I shared that edited video and said horrible things. I was wrong and I'm ashamed. Maya Chen deserves every apology. I participated in destroying her reputation, and I regret it deeply. Some of the apologies felt genuine. Others felt performative. People more concerned with being seen as on the right side now than actually examining why they had been so quick to believe the worst about a young black woman in the first place. Keisha called via FaceTime, her face appearing on Maya's screen with tears streaming down her cheeks. Zat, have you seen Twitter? Everyone knows the truth now. I'm seeing it, Maya said, managing a small smile. It's surreal. That flight attendant is getting destroyed online. People found her Facebook groups, her old posts, everything. She's being fully exposed. Maya felt complicated about that. Yes, Jessica Walsh deserved accountability. Yes, her actions had been cruel and calculated. But the internet's fury, while currently directed at someone who had done wrong, also reminded Maya of how quickly that same fury had been directed at her based on incomplete information. Just be careful about celebrating mob justice too much, Maya said quietly. The same people tearing her apart now are the ones who were tearing me apart 2 days ago. Keisha paused, then nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. This whole thing shows how dangerous viral narratives are, whether they're lies or truth. Dr. Patricia Morrison from Harvard Medical School sent a personal email that made Maya cry for the first time in hours. But these were good tears. Dear Maya, I have followed the developments of your case with horror and admiration. The grace and strength you have demonstrated throughout this ordeal only reinforces my belief that you belong at Harvard Medical School. Your interview is rescheduled for next week. But I want you to know that regardless of how that interview goes, you have already proven yourself to be exactly the kind of person we hope to graduate. Someone who faces injustice with dignity and demands accountability with courage. I look forward to meeting you in person. By noon, Congressman Michael Torres of Maryland's 7th District announced a formal investigation into discriminatory practices within the airline industry. The Chen case has exposed what many passengers of color have known for years, that discrimination in air travel is not isolated incidents, but a systemic problem. He stated at a press conference. Senator Rebecca Johnson of Massachusetts, chair of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation, issued a statement calling for comprehensive hearings. United Airlines is not alone in having employees who engage in racial profiling. We will be examining industry-wide practices and demanding accountability at the highest levels. The Department of Transportation opened an official investigation into United Airlines complaint handling procedures, specifically focusing on how discrimination complaints had been systematically buried and complainants silenced. The FBI announced they were investigating potential civil rights violations, not just by Jessica Walsh, but by the corporate structure that had protected her and actively worked to discredit her victims. United Airlines' stock dropped 12% by market close, a loss of approximately $2.8 billion in market capitalization. Investors weren't just reacting to one incident, but to the revelation of institutional rot that had been allowed to fester for years. Jennifer Morrison held a press conference at 2:01 p.m., looking haggard and reading from a prepared statement. United Airlines failed Maya Chen. We failed the other passengers who were targeted by discriminatory employees. And we failed our own employees who tried to speak up and were silenced. Today, I am announcing the immediate termination of 4 employees directly involved in this incident. And we are conducting a comprehensive review of all discrimination complaints filed in the past decade. A reporter called out, Ms. Morrison, why did it take a CEO's daughter being discriminated against for United to take action? What about all the passengers who didn't have those resources? Morrison's pause before answering spoke volumes. That is exactly the question we should all be asking ourselves. And it's why we are committed to systemic change, not just responding to this one case. 1 week later, Maya Chen sat before the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. The hearing room was packed with media, civil rights advocates, airline industry representatives, and people who had experienced similar discrimination but had never had a platform to share their stories. Maya wore a navy blue suit, professional but not trying to look older than her 23 years. Her mother's jade bracelet caught the light as she raised her right hand to be sworn in. "Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Maya said clearly. Congressman Torres leaned forward. "Miss Chen, thank you for your courage in testifying today. Please tell us, in your own words, what happened on March 15th, 2024. Maya took a breath and began. She spoke for 12 minutes without interruption, describing not just the facts of what happened, but the emotional experience, the humiliation, the fear, the feeling of being reduced to a stereotype by someone who had never bothered to see her as a person. "I am fortunate," Maya said, her voice steady. "I had resources many people don't have. My father could hire lawyers and investigators. We could get the truth out. But I keep thinking about all the people who experienced what I did, or worse, and had no recourse. The passengers who filed complaints were buried. The employees who tried to speak up and were retaliated against. The countless others who just accepted discrimination as the price of flying while black or brown or different from what someone decided belongs in first class." She looked directly at the committee members. "This hearing isn't really about me. It's about the systems that allowed Jessica Walsh to discriminate against passengers for 15 years. It's about the corporate structure that protected her and punished those who challenged her. It's about an industry that has treated discrimination as a PR problem to be managed, rather than a moral failing to be corrected." The room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. My grandmother came to this country with nothing but hope, that her children and grandchildren would have opportunities she never did. She taught my father, and my father taught me, that dignity is not something anyone can give you or take away. It's something you carry within yourself. Maya's voice grew stronger. "But while dignity is internal, respect must be external. And a society that allows people to be discriminated against based on their race is a society that has failed its most basic obligation to treat all people with equal respect." Representative Sandra Williams from Georgia, one of only 3 black women on the committee, wiped tears from her eyes. "Miss Chen, you have demonstrated remarkable composure throughout this ordeal. What do you want to see change as a result of your experience?" Maya pulled out her notes, not because she needed them, but because she wanted to be precise. First, mandatory reporting of all discrimination complaints to an independent body, not just internal company reviews. Second, protection for employees who file complaints or witness discrimination. Third, meaningful consequences for companies that maintain discriminatory practices, not just fines, but structural oversight. Fourth, compensation and apologies for past victims whose complaints were buried. And fifth, representation. More people of color in leadership positions at airlines so that discrimination is recognized and addressed at the highest levels. She paused, then added, "And maybe most importantly, we need to change the narrative around discrimination. When someone says they experienced racism, the default response should be to listen and investigate, not to assume they're lying or being oversensitive. The burden of proof shouldn't always fall on the victim. The testimony went viral even faster than the original incident." Maya's words resonated far beyond the airline industry. They spoke to anyone who had ever been discriminated against and told they were imagining it. By the time the hearing concluded, 3 more airlines had announced they were reviewing their discrimination complaint procedures. Delta Airlines proactively released a statement committing to independent oversight. Southwest Airlines announced a partnership with civil rights organizations to audit their practices. The tide was turning industry-wide. That evening, Maya received a phone call from an unexpected source. "Ms. Chen, this is Derek Martinez." "Derek," Maya said warmly. "How are you?" "Better, thanks to you. I wanted you to know. 5 more flight attendants came forward today with complaints they'd been too afraid to file before. Your testimony gave them courage. And United just announced they're creating a new position, Vice President of Equity and Inclusion. They asked if I'd be interested in applying." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Derek, that's incredible. You absolutely should. I'm thinking about it. But really, I called to say thank you. You turned your worst experience into a catalyst for change. That takes something special." After hanging up, Maya walked to her bedroom window and looked out at Baltimore's night sky. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, supporters, media requests, even speaking invitations from universities wanting her to share her story. Her father appeared in the doorway. "How are you holding up, baby girl?" "Exhausted," Maya admitted. "But okay. Dad, do you think this will actually change things? Or will everyone just move on to the next viral story?" James joined her at the window. "I think you've done something remarkable, Maya. You've given voice to people who've been silenced for too long. Will it solve everything? No, but it's started a conversation that needs to happen. And sometimes that's how real change begins. One brave person refusing to accept that discrimination is just the way things are." Maya leaned against her father's shoulder, feeling the weight of the past week settling on her. She had lost and regained her reputation. She had seen the worst of humanity and also the best. People like Judge Liu, Rachel Martinez, Robert Foster, and Derek Martinez, who had stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Tomorrow, she would fly to Boston for her rescheduled Harvard interview. This time, she would board the plane as a symbol of resilience, of justice, and of the ongoing fight for equality. But tonight, she was just Maya Chen, a 23-year-old woman who had survived something terrible and somehow emerged stronger. "I'm proud of you," James said quietly. "Your grandmother would be too," Maya smiled, touching the jade bracelet on her wrist. "I know." 3 months after Maya's congressional testimony, United Airlines headquarters in Chicago looked markedly different. Gone were several executives who had presided over the culture of silence. In their place stood a new leadership team that included Derek Martinez as the newly appointed Vice President of Equity and Inclusion, the youngest VP in the company's history. Derek's first major initiative was revolutionary, the Passenger Advocacy Program. Every discrimination complaint would now be reviewed by an independent panel that included civil rights attorneys, former passengers who had experienced discrimination, and airline employees. No more internal reviews that could be influenced by protecting company reputation. We received 347 complaints in the first 30 days of this program, Derek announced at a company-wide meeting. That's more than we officially acknowledged in the previous 5 years combined. And you know what that tells me? Not that we suddenly have more discrimination, but that passengers finally believe they'll be heard. Judge Henry Liu, now chair of United's Independent Oversight Board, implemented quarterly audits of crew interactions. Random flights would be reviewed for patterns of discriminatory behavior, not to punish employees for honest mistakes, but to identify and correct systemic issues before they escalated. The training program was completely redesigned. Instead of the typical 1-hour video about avoiding obvious slurs, United instituted a comprehensive 40-hour curriculum developed in partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative. Flight attendants, gate agents, and crew members spent a full week examining implicit bias, microaggressions, and the history of discrimination in American transportation. More radically, United established a $50 million reparations fund for passengers who had filed discrimination complaints in the past decade. Even those who had signed NDAs were released from them and offered compensation, counseling services, and public acknowledgement of what they had endured. Patricia Holmes worked with United's communications team to send personal letters to each of these passengers. One recipient was Marcus Tillman, the executive who had been targeted by Jessica Walsh 3 years earlier and forced into a settlement with an NDA. Tillman posted his letter on LinkedIn. "Today, I received an apology from United Airlines and compensation for an incident I was forced to stay silent about for years. But more valuable than the money is this, my voice being returned to me. Thank you, Maya Chen, for making this possible." His post was shared by thousands of people who had similar stories but had never been heard. The Chen case became a watershed moment for the entire transportation industry. What had started as one young woman's traumatic experience had evolved into a national reckoning with discrimination in air travel. American Airlines announced Operation Clear Skies, a comprehensive review of all customer service interactions over the past 5 years, using AI to detect patterns of discriminatory treatment. They discovered what many passengers of color had known anecdotally for years. Black passengers were 37% more likely to be removed from flights, 42% more likely to be questioned about ticket validity, and 51% more likely to be denied flight changes that white passengers received routinely. Delta Airlines partnered with the NAACP to create the Dignity in Travel Initiative, which included passenger advocates stationed at major airports to assist travelers who felt they were being discriminated against. Within 6 months, these advocates had intervened in 89 situations, preventing them from escalating to the level Maya's had. Southwest Airlines implemented body cameras for all crew members, a controversial decision that faced pushback from unions but ultimately passed after. Employees realized the cameras protected good workers from false accusations while holding discriminatory employees accountable. Transportation Security Administration began its own reckoning, examining why passengers of color were disproportionately selected for additional screening. New protocols were established, and screeners received enhanced training on unconscious bias, but the ripple effects extended beyond aviation. Amtrak examined its conductor practices. Uber and Lyft reviewed driver ratings to see if racial bias affected how passengers were rated. Even cruise lines began auditing their customer service procedures. The Harvard Business School developed a case study on the Chen incident, which became required reading in their business ethics curriculum. This case demonstrates how discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's also catastrophically bad for business. Professor William Chen, no relation, wrote in the case study introduction. United Airlines lost billions in market value, spent tens of millions on reforms, and damaged a brand built over decades. And all of it could have been prevented if they had simply listened to the complaints they were receiving and acted with integrity. Maya Chen walked across the stage at Harvard Medical School orientation. No longer the traumatized young woman who had been forcibly removed from a flight 6 months earlier. She'd been accepted to Harvard, but more importantly, she had discovered a new calling that merged her medical aspirations with advocacy work. During her orientation speech to incoming medical students, Maya spoke about health equity and how discrimination in everyday spaces like airports translated to discrimination in healthcare settings. Implicit bias doesn't stop at the hospital door, she told her new classmates. If we're going to be effective physicians, we need to examine our own prejudices and commit to treating every patient with equal dignity, regardless of their race, their insurance status, or their zip code. Her speech received a standing ovation, but Maya's transformation went deeper than public speaking. She had launched the Chen Foundation for Transportation Equity with an initial $5 million donation from her parents, matched by contributions from civil rights organizations, and even some airline industry donors seeking to demonstrate their commitment to change. The foundation provided legal assistance to passengers facing discrimination, funded research on bias in transportation systems, and offered scholarships to students of color pursuing careers in aviation and transportation policy. creating a pipeline of diverse leaders who would change the industry from within. Maya also partnered with Rachel Martinez, the graduate student who had recorded the original incident, to create a documentary called The Price of First Class. The film examined not just Maya's story, but the stories of dozens of other passengers who had experienced discrimination, stories that had never made headlines because the victims didn't have Maya's resources or platform. The documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was later acquired by Netflix, where it sparked thousands of conversations about everyday discrimination and the importance of being an active witness rather than a passive bystander. Perhaps the most surprising development came from an unexpected source. Sharon Bennett, the flight attendant who had participated in Maya's harassment, requested a meeting through Derek Martinez. Maya was hesitant. What could she possibly have to say to me? Maybe nothing that will matter, her father advised. But maybe something that needs to be said. You don't owe her forgiveness, but you might owe yourself the chance to hear her out. They met in a quiet coffee shop in Baltimore, with Derek present as a neutral mediator. Sharon looked dramatically different from the woman in the viral videos, older somehow, worn down by the weight of what she had done. I don't expect you to forgive me, Sharon began, her voice shaking. I participated in something cruel and unjust. I told myself I was just following Jessica's lead, that I was too junior to speak up, but those are excuses. I had a choice, and I made the wrong one. Maya listened without interrupting. Losing my job was the worst thing that ever happened to me, Sharon continued, tears starting to fall. But it was also the best thing. It forced me to confront who I had become. I've spent the last 6 months in therapy, examining why I was so willing to go along with discrimination. Why I valued keeping a job over standing up for what was right. She pulled out a folder. I've been documenting other incidents I witnessed during my time at United, times when passengers were treated differently based on race, and I said nothing. Times when I could have intervened, and I chose comfort over courage. Derek suggested I share these with your foundation to help with your research on systemic discrimination. Maya took the folder, skimming its contents. Dates, flight numbers, detailed descriptions of discriminatory incidents spanning 3 years. It was damning evidence, but also evidence of genuine remorse and a commitment to making amends. What are you doing now? Maya asked. I'm working at a non-profit that helps recently released prisoners reintegrate into society, Sharon said. It doesn't pay well, but it's teaching me about second chances and redemption. And I'm volunteering with the Equal Justice Initiative, helping develop their airline industry training program. They were willing to give me a chance to contribute, even though I don't deserve it. Maya was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her grandmother's teachings on dignity, about her father's lessons on justice, about her own journey from victim to advocate. I don't forgive you, Maya said finally, her voice clear and steady. At least not yet. What you did caused real harm. To me and probably to passengers I'll never know about. But I appreciate you taking accountability. I appreciate you trying to be better. And I'll make sure your documentation helps us prevent others from experiencing what I did. Sharon nodded, wiping her eyes. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. As Sharon left, Derek turned to Maya. That took courage from both of you. Maya sipped her coffee, contemplating the strange path that had led her here. My dad always says that justice without the possibility of redemption is just revenge. I'm not sure I believe that yet, but maybe I'm starting to understand it. 6 months after the incident, Maya boarded a flight from Boston to San Francisco to present her gene therapy research at a medical conference. She had deliberately chosen United Airlines for this flight, not because she had forgiven them, but because she wanted to see firsthand whether the changes were real or just performative. She approached the gate with her boarding pass in hand, her heart rate elevated despite her best efforts to remain calm. The gate agent, a young black woman, smiled warmly when she saw Maya. Ms. Chen, it's an honor to have you flying with us today. Your advocacy work has meant so much to me personally. I'm actually in this job because of you. I was inspired to apply after United announced their diversity hiring initiative. Maya felt an unexpected emotion tighten her throat. Thank you. That means a lot. You're in first class today, seat 2A, the agent continued. And just so you know, you belong there. You've always belonged there. Maya boarded the plane, her hands steadier now. As she approached her seat, a flight attendant greeted her immediately. A middle-aged Latina woman whose name tag read Maria Gonzalez. Senior flight attendant. Welcome aboard, Ms. Chen, Maria said warmly. Can I get you something to drink before we take off? We have water, juice, coffee, tea, anything you'd like. Orange juice, please, Maya said, managing a smile. Maria returned moments later with a full glass of fresh squeezed orange juice and a warm towel. Here you are. And Ms. Chen, I just want you to know what you did change my life too. I was a gate agent for 15 years, passed over for promotion repeatedly. After the reforms, I was finally given the opportunity to become a flight attendant. I'll never forget that you made that possible. As the plane took off, Maya looked out the window at the clouds below, thinking about how far she had come from that traumatic morning 6 months ago. She hadn't asked to become a symbol or an advocate. She had simply asked for orange juice and been treated like she didn't belong. But from that painful moment came something powerful: change, accountability, and hope that the next young woman of color who boarded a plane wouldn't have to fight the same battle. Maya pulled out her laptop and opened the draft of her speech for the medical conference. She had added a new section about how fighting discrimination in one arena empowered people to fight it in others, how justice was indivisible, and dignity was universal. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Proud of you, baby girl. Changed the world today. Maya smiled and typed back, already on it. Dad? As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Maya Chen, survivor, advocate, future physician, got back to work, knowing that her grandmother would be proud of the woman she had become. Maya Chen's story reveals 5 critical truths about discrimination in modern America. Jessica Walsh never used a slur. She simply questioned Maya's ticket, denied her service given to others, and filed false reports. This is how most discrimination functions today: subtle enough to deny, obvious enough to wound. It hides behind policy enforcement and security concerns, while selectively targeting the same groups repeatedly. Without Rachel's video, Judge Liu's audio, and the aircraft cameras, Maya would have been just another difficult passenger whose word meant nothing against official reports. In our digital age, witnessing injustice means recording it. Complete, unedited evidence is often the only thing standing between truth and erasure. Maya's father could hire lawyers, investigators, and PR professionals. He had business leverage and media connections. Most discrimination victims have none of these advantages. They experience the same injustice, but lack any pathway to fight back. This reveals an uncomfortable reality. Our justice system often only works for those who can afford it. Firing Jessica Walsh mattered, but the real problem was the 15-year system that protected her, buried complaints, and retaliated against whistleblowers. Derek tried reporting her 6 months earlier and was punished. That structure needed demolishing, not just personnel changes. Maya needed recordings, footage, witnesses, and expert analysis just to be heard. Meanwhile, Jessica's accusations were accepted immediately. Why do we demand extraordinary evidence from discrimination victims while believing accusers without question? This imbalance itself reflects the prejudice we claim to reject. This case exposes how discrimination persists within institutions despite decades of supposed progress. United knew about Walsh's pattern. They'd settled complaints before, but protecting the brand mattered more than protecting passengers. This pattern repeats everywhere. Companies use NDAs to silence victims, retaliate against internal critics, and manage PR rather than address root causes. The institution's image becomes more sacred than people's dignity. The edited video nearly destroyed Maya's life, reaching millions before truth could respond. Yet those same platforms enabled her vindication when complete footage emerged. This teaches crucial skepticism. Viral outrage often lacks context. How many people have we condemned based on incomplete clips? How many lives are damaged by our rush to judgment? If your word against your accusers isn't enough, if video evidence can be dismissed as edited, if witnesses can be ignored as biased, what possible standard could victims ever meet? The game is rigged to favor those in power, which is exactly why systemic change matters more than individual cases. New oversight boards and training programs matter, but culture determines whether they actually work. Laws create frameworks. Culture decides if those frameworks protect people or just create paperwork. United needed both the independent review board and employees like Derek, empowered to speak up without retaliation. If you see yourself in Maya's story, if you've been dismissed, told you're overreacting, accused of playing the card, hear this clearly. You're not imagining it. Your experience was real. Your pain matters. Subtle discrimination is still discrimination. Hard to prove doesn't mean it didn't happen. Others not seeing it doesn't erase your reality. And if you've never experienced this, your role is equally vital. Be Judge Lou speaking up. Be Rachel documenting the truth. Be Derek risking your career for what's right. Passive disapproval of racism accomplishes nothing. Your silence is a choice with consequences. Every passenger who watched Maya's harassment and said nothing became complicit. But this story also teaches the power of transformation. Maya didn't just survive trauma, she converted it into industry-wide change. She could have taken settlement money and disappeared quietly. Instead, she chose public battle, knowing it would prolong pain but might spare others. That's real courage, not fearlessness, but acting despite fear for something larger than yourself. Have you experienced discrimination while traveling? Share your story in the comments. Your voice deserves to be heard. Type justice if Maya was right to fight publicly. Type change if this story changed how you'll respond to discrimination. Type witness if you commit to active intervention rather than passive observation. What moment resonated most? Maya's testimony? Derek's courage? Judge Lou's intervention? Sharon's accountability? Tell us below. Hit that like button to help this reach others who need it, both those who've experienced discrimination and those who need to understand what it looks like. Subscribe for more stories exposing injustice and inspiring change. Share this with someone who needs Maya's message. Maya boarded, expecting a routine flight. She left with reputation destroyed and opportunity lost, simply because someone decided she didn't belong in first class based on skin color. But from that pain came transformation. Accountability for discriminators, policy protecting future passengers, a foundation supporting victims, a documentary educating millions, and inspiration for countless others to speak up. The system that protected Jessica was dismantled. Derek went from punished whistleblower to VP. Sharon moved from complicit bystander to advocate. Judge Liu from observer to oversight chairman. And Maya from victim to powerful voice for justice. Her grandmother's jade bracelet, meant for clarity and protection, delivered both. It reminded Maya that dignity comes from within, resilience runs in families, and fighting injustice honors those before while protecting those after. This story matters because it's common, not unique. Discrimination happens daily to millions. Most never make headlines. Most never get justice. Most wrongdoers never face consequences. But every time someone refuses silence, every time someone speaks despite risks, every time someone uses privilege to advocate, every time someone documents instead of scrolling, change becomes possible. Maya's grandmother came to America with hope for future generations. That hope was tested when her granddaughter was removed for asking for orange juice while black. But it was vindicated when Maya transformed humiliation into movement. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.